Well, another day, another A-tip. Now, as an aside, before I get started, nerdy as it sounds, I love access to information requests. They're probably the easiest weapon to deploy in a journalist's arsenal. Just ask a public entity for information, and because they're on the public purse, more often than not, they're obligated to fill the entirety of your request. And lo and behold, chances are you'll find a government agent, bureaucrats, politicians, all exposing their agenda and digging their own political grave right there in black and white. And yet, so many journalists, they're so busy reporting whether a world leader had one scoop or two, they can't be bothered to legally obtain and read through government documents of import. But, oh well, more scoops for me as far as I'm concerned. All right, so this time the Rebel asked Canada's Federal Immigration Department to provide copies of any documents such as reports, studies, etc. that provide any statistics or information on the employment status for Syrian refugees brought to Canada. And what's really awesome about these 654 pages that we got back is that the most interesting stuff isn't even really the employment statistics that we asked for. What's interesting is the pattern of repeated instructions between officials to not tell Canadians the truth about the sort of refugees that we're importing en masse to this country. Repeated instructions to conceal the truth from Canadians lest they be upset. Because as it turns out, Syria isn't sending us their best. All right, let's dig in. Here are some of the most concerning stats that we found in our immigration A-tip. Turns out a whackload of these Syrians are sick, and even more of them can't speak English. As for illness, more than 1 in every 10 Syrian migrants, 12% of them to be precise, have at least one medical condition, while most of the files flagged for additional screening or for the potential of tuberculosis. So considering Canada has brought in 40,081 Syrians to date, according to the 12% figure, simple math dictates that 4,800 and about 10 of them have at least one medical condition. Yay for socialized medicine, eh, guys? As for language obstacles to assimilation, well, to be sorted out again via the public purse, the vast majority of the Syrian refugees Canada is bringing in have absolutely no abilities in either official language. According to a self-report issued by the Syrian migrants 25 and older, 88% of them say that they have absolutely no English or French skills whatsoever. Meantime, visa offices, well, they suggest that that number is actually even higher, closer to somewhere between 90 and 95%. Translation, only 5% of the Syrian refugees Canada is importing have the most basic English upon landing. In other words, some 38,077 Syrians have to be taught English or French in hopes of just obtaining a job or ever integrating into our bilingual society. And in the event you're wondering why this is the first time you're hearing about how striking the language and literacy rates are of those who we're importing, well, that's because Canadian officials were actually instructed to remove lines about limited literacy from these Syrian migrants, just altogether from their messaging. And that's not the only time that officials were told to obfuscate the truth. What about employment and government assistance for these refugees? Well, apparently, not all refugees are adapting equally. While officials acknowledge both private and government-sponsored Syrians are below the levels of employment seen in the past with refugees, as a whole, the privately sponsored Syrian refugees, they are faring better than the ones on the government's watch, go figure. Privately sponsored refugees are getting more jobs and faster. However, officials don't want you to know that. In fact, immigration officials were given instructions to double down on why government focused on government-sponsored refugees instead of the privately sponsored refugees who are more educated and better integrated. But gee, why would they double down on that? Perhaps it has something to do with the fact that the Prime Minister actually decided to cap the number of the privately sponsored refugees, you know, the ones who are integrating better and getting off the public purse sooner, while increasing the number of publicly sponsored Syrians, you know, the ones who aren't getting hired. Is it any wonder then that Canada's immigration authority doesn't want to commit to releasing their so-called rapid impact evaluation report on the Syrian refugees' integration? Maybe it's because they're not integrating. So, what's happening with these refugees who can't speak English or French, might be sick, and aren't finding work? Well, they're getting all sorts of social benefits. But again, the government doesn't want Canadians to know as much. After acknowledging a massive rise in Syrian refugee use of food banks, the ATIP reveals an order to remove lines that mention Syrian refugees are receiving social assistance and child care checks because critics would be upset about double dipping. You think? But hey, we're Canadians, right? We want to help families, women and children in need, right? And they are mostly women and children coming in, of course. I mean, we were told that Canada is turning away single men as part of our Syrian refugee program. Well, then, how do you explain these instructions to remove statistics on migrant gender breakdown? And I quote, "The number of males admitted will cause hysteria among those who thought we were keeping men out." You know, with all of these instructions on what not to tell the Canadian taxpayer, the people just footing the medical schooling and welfare bills for these Syrian men, it sort of makes you wonder what else the government is hiding from us. For the Rebel.media, I'm Faith Goldy. If you enjoyed this video, click like below and subscribe to our YouTube channel.